everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Cameron Kelly Smith. Please make sure to hit that subscribe and notification button to stay tuned on the content I produce each and every week in the world of wrestling and movie related discussions. I'm joined here today by Bony Fonseca, making his comeback to the show. And today we're going to simply talk about the MCU versus the DCEU and how, if possible, or can DC ever catch up. Now, the reason why this video became a topic is because the last year, or not even the last year, but the last few months in particular has just felt really Marvel-centric. And I think that there's been a sense that DC has been somewhat forgotten. At least for me, like I know Shazam came out this year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, the only two movies on DC's calendar for this year was Shazam, which, you know, I really enjoyed. I know you really enjoyed it as well, but I didn't make as much money as I think they hoped. And then Joker, which comes out in the autumn. But, you know, this discussion in regards to if DC can catch up, this was a very different discussion a few years ago, because I remember Man of Steel had came out in 2013, critically divided, but it did really well. We then had the announcement at Comic-Con that Batman v Superman was coming, and I remember how we felt when that happened. Like, that felt like...
Remember the trailer? Crazy.
Like, it felt like DC, like it really did not feel like a one-person war. You had Marvel with their slate, you had DC coming with their slate, you then had Fox with their slate, and then Sony were trying to do their thing as well. But DC in particular, like I remember when Batman v Superman was announced, that was one of the single greatest Comic-Con movie announcements of all time. And as you said, then the following year or the year after that, coming with that trailer, dangerous, man. It's like, where did it go wrong? Where do you think? And that's assuming that we think it did go wrong. But I think you can argue that DC obviously did fall off the rails a little bit in comparison to where we were hoping they were going to be, or at least where they were targeting themselves to be. So where did it go wrong? Where did this all start to become a discussion of Marvel is clearly ahead and DC does not have somewhat of a chance to be able to come back?
See, I think when Batman vs Superman came out, I think the response from that was the real big divider, really.
Yeah.
Because when that came out, a lot of it just underperformed, really. Like, and that's it in a simple case. Like, it just underperformed, and there was a lot of things that were questionable within the movie, and then there was a lot of things that people just wanted answers from, and then the uncut version came from, and you remember the response from that. That was a lot better than the actual response from the movie, but even then there was still a lot of weird plot holes and plot lines going in for it. And then to make it even worse, because that movie wasn't that great, the introduction of characters to the extended universe became subpar. As in, you need to remember that the whole Justice League was released through an email plot. But anyway, yeah, it was released through an email. We see it in Batman vs Superman, but even that seemed kind of odd and off-putting because of the way the movie is. And it seemed kind of forced in. If everyone remembers Steve Rogers waking up at the end of Captain America First Avenger, where he wakes up in this new world and then runs out, and Nick Fury is the one that thing, and he says, I missed the dance.
Yeah.
Everything, all kind of the shoe-in, kind of trying to connect it, feels organic. With the DC, it's not as bad as Amazing Spider-Man 2, where you see everything as a setup. But the way they tried to set up their world was now it seemed like it was an afterthought, really. And it seemed like they just kind of put it in there, and they were not like, oh yeah, we're making a universe. And then it it seemed like a second thought during the production.
Yeah. So then to that point, because I think that both of us and a lot of us can agree that Batman v Superman for Warner Brothers and DC, that was going to be their catalyst to make their universe, the movie that was going to launch everything. That movie, let's just go back to that announcement at Comic-Con, and I believe it was 2013 when they made that announcement. That movie, you had two of the biggest, if not the biggest, comic book characters in pop culture coming together in a movie for the first time. And the hype around that movie was so big, and I remember being so disappointed walking out after seeing that movie. But that was the catalyst for them to make their universe. But was that ultimately the movie that just completely proved that, at least at that point, that they just couldn't do it?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of other factors. I think the lack of leadership and direction is what DC needs, and is what DC has been lacking. As in, Marvel has Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
As in, we always say don't have too many chefs in the kitchen, but that's not the case when it comes to Marvel. Marvel has a sous chef, it has other people what doing work.
Incredible team.
But the problem is all under the direction of Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure, like, when they're in the office, they're thinking of things that have to happen in every movie.
Yeah.
Like, you want to make this movie, you can make it however you want, and that's what I really like about Marvel. Marvel gives directors a lot of leeway. And times when they haven't, I feel like for me, Marvel kind of fell off somewhere in phase 2. There was like a bit of a weird era. Like there was that whole thing with Edgar Wright trying to direct Ant-Man.
Ant-Man, yeah.
And it didn't go through because they didn't want his vision for Ant-Man.
Was phase 2 like your Thor Dark World, and that was that?
Yeah. It was during that era where I was just like, there was a few like ifs and buts over there. But Kevin Feige has really led this way. And what we need is not only direction, but I also wanted to discuss one thing. I think DC also have a problem with the properties they're choosing to come out with. Because I think doing a Superman film is amazing. Yeah. Choosing not to then have a Man of Steel 2 is a big issue.
That was...
As in, the character has had an issue with how... People have had a lot of problems with how a Superman is portrayed. I don't per se, because I felt like there was a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
I feel like it's not the Superman we know, and I feel like that was okay as long as it ended up there.
Yeah.
But what we got in Justice League was a rushed version of that.
Yeah.
As in, even in Justice League at the beginning, it feels like a lot of their movies are trying to say sorry or cover up other past movies, and that's what I feel like. They're spending too much time saying sorry for this, so they can't focus on the future as much. Like, the whole of Justice League felt like it was a fan letter to Superman, basically saying, look, we have the Superman you want. And, like, even at the beginning of the movie, we was getting told that Superman was this light, Superman was this hope, Superman was this, that, and the other. But we don't actually see that in any of the other movies. And the reason why I wanted to discuss the characters of DC is because I remember seeing a video of saying like some of the DC characters are flawed, and it's because they're so godlike. Yeah, DC more than Marvel are like their characters tend to be more godlike. It's why we appreciate Batman in the middle of all of this of not being godlike. Yeah, it's why we appreciate the normality of certain characters, like when you see Green Arrow or when you see like it's just all these characters that you just appreciate because there's all these gods among us. Yeah. And the problem with having gods as character is you have to depower them. You have to find another way inside. You have to go on internal conflict, which is why Man of Steel was the way it was. That's why I don't have any complaints, because if you're going to tackle a god, you either have to depower him or you have to have internal struggle when they're that powerful.
But I mean, to your point, because when we're looking in regards to if DC can catch up to Marvel and exactly what did go wrong. Like, I think you touched on 2 points, which I think are, at least in my opinion, the two major points. I think one is leadership. Kevin Feige, who is the president of Marvel Studios, him and his team, like we've discussed this before, I have never in the history of cinema seen a team and a leadership executed so well where you're making movie after movie that is critically received well, commercially received well, and box office wise is making a ton of money. Like, we've just never seen that before. And obviously Marvel being the guys to do this, they are the ones that brought in and introduced the shared cinematic universe, which is something that a lot of studios are now trying to replicate. But I think that when it comes down to DC and where they went wrong, I think one is leadership. I think that's the core. I mean, the last guy that was in charge of Warner Brothers in DC, I can't remember his name, but obviously he was... a lot of the blame went down to him and there being too many cooks in the kitchen. We'll get onto who's now in charge of DC and their properties in a minute. But I think that leadership was the major thing, first and foremost. And then I don't want to put the blame down to him, this next person that I'm going to say, but I think that some of it has to be there, and that is Zack Snyder. Batman v Superman and Justice League. Justice League, we'll get to in a second. But with Batman v Superman, I don't think that you can argue that movie is deeply flawed. That movie has issues, like whether it be the editing, whether it be certain plot points. Like, that movie, in my opinion, is bad. Man of Steel was received...
I don't think it's that bad in my opinion.
Okay, well, I personally thought that it was bad. And Man of Steel was obviously received half and half. Some people loved it, some people hated it. Probably more people hated it than actually loved it. But I think that with Zack Snyder, when you make Man of Steel, which obviously to us, well, at least to me, I think is a masterpiece of a comic book movie. When you make Man of Steel, which was received portionally well, and then you go and make Batman v Superman, which the majority of people did not like, and then obviously Justice League, which is a bit of a different scenario, I do once again then go back to the leadership in terms of Warner Brothers not being able to kind of get their crap together and being able to maybe change direction in regards to the filmmaker that they actually had involved. As I said, I love Man of Steel, so maybe but it always has been a bit hit and miss with Zack Snyder in terms of his movies, in my opinion. But I just feel that leadership and Zack Snyder, those two things, I felt that they both needed a bit of a refresher, which we have got now. But at the time, I think it was what was much needed to make things a bit better going forward.
Though, in terms of Justice League, that wasn't his fault. I truly believe that. Like, there's all this talk about a Zack Snyder cut, and you need to realize a lot of things was going on with him during that period. Yeah. He even got taken off the project. Just Whedon came in, and I feel like that. I feel like the problem that DC has in general is to do with Warner's involvement with their movies a lot of the time. I feel like after the ripple effect of Batman v Superman, and what that was the studio no longer having trust in DC. So I felt like especially in Justice League, I felt it the most. I felt like it was a studio trying to play it safe. Mm-hmm. I felt like there was a lot of stuff, like I see snippets of like gleaming of like hope in Justice League where I'm just like, that would have been a nice avenue to take. That would have been interesting. That would have been different. And in Justice League, it seems like there was a lot of studio interference with that, and I can see it on screen. You know when you see studio interference and you see it on screen, and you say, "Oh, okay, the studio doesn't wanna take that route." Okay, you can see it on screen, and Justice League had mountains and mountains of like interference of changing directors, of studio just being there. That if the studio wasn't involved, there would be no reason for like fans to be screaming for a Snyder cut. Yeah. And even,
which, by the way, though, like in terms of the Snyder cut, like I know there's been a lot of debate about this recently, but an actual movie, like a fully edited movie by Zack Snyder that is Justice League, doesn't exist. Like it is just chopped up and unedited and unfinished. So that's why I know there's a lot of people that want to see a Snyder cut, but it doesn't fully exist as like a full movie. It doesn't.
To be fair, I think what might have happened, and I think what people are asking for in terms of fans, is the story wise, there's different plot points. Even Snyder himself has released like certain bits from the so-called Snyder cut where you see different plot points. You see different plot points with Cyborg specifically, and you see his mother and his dad doing the whole Apocalypse thing. You even see a picture of Apocalypse. So I think
Darkseid.
Darkseid. Sorry. So when I think people are saying this, I think there is actually a cut out there where it's not called a Snyder cut. I think there's a cut and a version of it where the shooting script and the script itself, and there's an edited version of what Zack Snyder wanted. And I think that differs from the movie we see on screen. So I think when people ask for the Snyder cut, I'm saying everything that was in the shooting script, everything that was meant to be edited, because obviously they have plans for all of this, just put all those things together to make the movie, because I think they have all the shots. Because the fact that Snyder has enough confidence to release footage or release pictures of an alternate version of these ideas, then says something else. And you need to understand, if we watch the first Justice League movie, that's a very different movie than the second trailer. I asked everyone to go to the Justice League, the first trailer of the Justice League, and then go to the latest trailer of the Justice League. They're like, it's kind of like black and white.
Yeah.
And that's why, and the thing is, Joss Whedon has such a specific like way of directing.
Yeah, 100%.
You can see in Justice League when you can literally point at it and be like, that's a Whedon did that. Whedon shot that scene, and you can tell. The whole post-credit scene, you know for a fact Joss Whedon did that. That's his style. That's what he likes.
But okay, I mean, based on what you said though, so obviously like we've discussed like in terms of leadership and too many cooks in the kitchen, and Warner Brothers are obviously getting their fingers into the DC properties, interrupting what directors' visions are. So I believe that they have somewhat moved on from that. Obviously, we had Wonder Woman, which is through and through a Patty Jenkins movie. She said so. It looks it. It does. We've not heard any disruption in regards to Warner having an influence in regards to, or at least a huge influence in regards to Wonder Woman. Obviously, Patty Jenkins is a well-renowned director. She's very, very, very respected in Hollywood. So we had that. We then had Aquaman, obviously James Wan Aquaman, which I think is another one that kind of proved that them letting the filmmaker do their job. And by the way, let me just point it out that Warner Brothers, in regards to their DC properties, did have a shift in direction, that now they have Walter Hamada, which is essentially DC's version of Kevin Feige, in that he has essentially come in, and according to reports, he has basically taken the approach, and through statements he's made, has taken the approach of saying, okay, we're going to develop scripts on multiple different movies, and once we feel like there's a script that is truly ready and we want to make, we're going to make. Obviously, that now means that, for example, we have heard rumors of a Supergirl movie being made. Obviously, Birds of Prey comes out next year. Joker comes out this year with Joaquin Phoenix, the Todd Phillips Joker. And we're hearing like a lot of different movies under development at DC that not exactly would not give off the impression that they're creating a shared universe, but rather we're going to make a movie. It's going to kind of stand on its own and we're going to move on. Now, I think for DC currently, that is the best move, because I think that DC did prove that the method that they were trying to use previously did not work. And I think that they've gone to a slight back to basics route, where it's like, we're going to have a filmmaker focused movie. We're going to develop a good script, get a good filmmaker to come on, let them do their thing. I think we had a similar thing with Shazam this year. Todd Phillips' Joker coming out later on in the year does also prove that point. But the big question is that part of Marvel's success, at least in my opinion, has been the shared universe, and then being able to do it so well. And I think that the shared universe with Marvel does also then translate to some of the box office that they've had. Obviously, we've seen certain movies come after big movies, or just come after the big team-up movies and make tons of money, and also been much more interesting because they are connected to the universe. But my question is to you now, with DC's method that they are taking right now, with developing a movie, developing a script, and if it's ready to go, they're good to do it. Do you think that they can use that method to, one, be successful, which I think arguably they are currently, but being able to catch up to Marvel? Like, what do they need? Can that work? The method that they're taking now, or what extra do they need, or what do they need to pull back on?
You see, I think, in my opinion, it's not the best method that they're operating right now. Because one, I think they're trying to throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what sticks. That's literally their approach right now. And the problem with that is there's a lot of stories that are getting through the cracks, which it wouldn't be your first choice. Like, you need to understand, before we got Avengers, before we got all that, there's a lot of stuff that had to happen before we got Guardians. Like, there's like moving pieces before that, and it feels like we're already getting those movies before we've gotten the original stuff out. So it seems a bit weird. Like, for example, when you heard Birds of Prey, a part of you does feel like it's an odd choice for a movie, and it might be amazing, and it might do wonders. But then when you think of how does that extend the universe, you have to kind of think to yourself.
Okay, but then let me just jump off of that, because obviously 20 years ago, 15 years ago, like the shared universe wasn't a thing. And if we had seen, for example, there was that Green Arrow movie many years ago that was in development. And it's like, if 10, 15, 20 years ago, the shared universe didn't exist, and I don't really think a lot of us would be coming on saying, or having any issues of if they made a Supergirl movie that did not maybe have any link to a wider universe. Obviously, the cinematic universe didn't exist then. But is it a thing now where you just made the point in terms of you feel like they're odd choices? Does that mean that has Marvel made it a world right now where, when it comes to comic book properties, and DC in particular, in order for them to be able to be received well and to be deemed successful, do they need to have a shared universe that is successful? Can they not just release any kind of movies they want? Does it need to be connected? Have we been programmed in that way?
See, I don't think so, because when you look at Marvel, you have to look at another, in my opinion, another successful shared universe, which is the X-Men universe. I think that successfully did it. Not all their movies were amazing, not all their movies was great, but it was a shared universe, and I think they had a lot of good movies under its belt. I think that was a universe that was able to do that. The problem with DC right now, that I have the biggest problem when I talk about it, is now We know they have plans for a shared universe. We know that was their original plan. Everyone under the sun knows that.
But do we think it's their plan now, though?
But here's the thing: it's too late for that. The problem with what they did is they came out with this DC Worlds. That was last Comic Con. That was literally only a year ago when they said,
"Oh, it's like Worlds of DC."
Yeah, world where we're not operating under DCEU, is the Worlds of DC now. That was literally last year. It wasn't a few years ago. It wasn't 6 years ago. This was still operating in this era where there does.
But I don't think they've come off of that though.
No, I don't think they've come out off of it. But that's what I mean. When you're trying to create a universe, you have to calculate what you're going to put into that universe. You have to calculate how things are going to move each other. If you think about even the Batman movie with Matt Reeves, we have no idea how that connects. What you're leaving the audience, what the DC's leaving the audience doing is thinking, is this universe even alive anymore? Does it exist anymore? And what consists within that universe? And who's even in Shazam, it was kind of like, you're thinking to yourself, does the Justice League even exist anymore in this world? Is there such a thing as the Justice League? Because I have no idea. I have no idea if the Justice League is operating.
But on that point, because sorry to cut you off, because I'm glad you made that point, because the thing is, right, when it comes to the DC movies that we have seen previously, like over the last year and a half, 2 years, those movies, and I'm talking your Wonder Woman, your Aquaman, your Shazam, the thing about what it is, right, with DC, in my opinion, I think that they do not need, at least right now, even though I yearn for it and I want to see it, I don't think that they need to necessarily have a universe, quote unquote, a universe of movies that connect and interconnect. I think that you can do solo and spin-off, not solo movies, but movies that stand alone. But then the point that you just made in regards to like watching Shazam and, you know, that cameo where you see a Superman appear, we presume is Henry Cavill's. Like, I think that lends to the issue that I do have with DC currently, in that we're getting this Matt Reeves Batman movie, right? Which is going to be, from what we know, completely different and completely non-related, to the current DC universe. But the thing that does annoy me, that I think is confusing, is that you have Wonder Woman, you have Aquaman, you have Shazam, you have Birds of Prey. And these are movies that do still link to that cinematic universe that did once exist. With the Todd Phillips Joker movie, completely different. Standalone, not related to any universe, we get that. But I think the issue I have, as you said, that you're alluding to, with Matt Reeves' Batman coming soon, which is not going to be related, with other movies that we presume might not be related, you know, it's like we still have these characters that are still linked to this previous universe, but then it seems like they're also trying to introduce characters that are not linked to this universe. And I think that's when it starts to get a bit annoying, where it's like, should they just, like, they need to pick a direction? Should they just reboot, or are we just going to have these two parallel things going with each other?
Like, the biggest problem I have is we don't know what this universe is yet. We have no idea. As I said, there's semblances of the old universes. There's new direction. I think the movie for me that's going to make the biggest, I think, decider and idea of where this world is, what this world's going to be, is actually James Gunn's Suicide Squad. I think that movie lets everyone know what's happening with the universe. Because one, you're taking characters from multiple different people, like heroes, rogue gallery, for one, so you have to connect them to the heroes. And I don't think you can do that movie without, in a way, it's kind of like doing a weird version of Avengers on Earth, but not having any connection to Earth. So I think that movie I think his job for that movie is to let us know what the universe is at, where is that, how are these villains doing, well, what kind of world is it? Is Gotham different than what we've
But does that movie then annoy you as well, knowing that Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is in the movie, but at the same time we're getting people who aren't necessarily linked to that universe in the movie, how Idris Elba is now. I'm not too sure. I think it was confirmed that Idris Elba isn't actually playing Will Smith's Deadshot.
No,
he's playing someone else. But does that like annoy you though as well, where it's like, okay, this is a soft reboot, but we're still linking characters from the previous universe? Like, do they need a clean slate, or like, how can they make this work?
You see, I don't think they need a clean slate. As I said, the one universe that I think has done well is the X-Men universe. And we've seen soft reboots within the X-Men universe. We've seen scenes redone again. And like, a good example, one of my favorite films from the X-Men universe is First Class. There's certain stuff that they touch on in other movies about the First Class,
Yeah.
and they just reintroduce it. And I think First Class is a perfect way of having a soft reboot with new characters in a world that already exists, and letting expanding the world. Because then we've got Days of Future Past. You saw both of the universes. Obviously, it's like a particular circumstance where they had a storyline which fits in. But all I think that DC really needs is a storyline that allows them to expand, allows them to be like, this is the change.
So are you trying to say, like, for example, you mentioned Days of Future Past. Obviously, that was almost like, that was not
Like
a
a
reboot,
flashpoint.
but it was kind of like, like a similar, like to a Flashpoint where they clean things up, adjust the timeline, and just make it in a way so that everyone within this timeline is actually in this timeline, and they join it together and they tidy some things up, clean some things up. Do they need something like that for DC then?
I think they need a storyline that does the same job. I don't think it needs to be going back in time. That's why I said I think maybe Suicide Squad might be that movie. I think it just needs a movie where you're just reintroducing us to that. That's why I mentioned First Class, because I think First Class was able to do that with none of his old characters, and still introduce the universe, because we still see Wolverine in a bar in that, but you still see them introducing us to this whole universe full of these different mutants, with two mutants that we already grew accustomed to, but in a very, very new way. And I think DC needs to do that. I think they need to have a movie where they just like, okay, our universe is this. This is the world you're getting used to. That's why I compare James Gunn's Suicide Squad so much to First Class, because I think that movie can do the same thing that First Class did. Because what I would like to see in the future would be a movie like that, like a First Class movie, and then a movie like Days of Future Past, where they just explain where the world is. I think we need to get introduced to this new world. In fact, I don't think we need much explanation. First Class had no explanation on Charles and Eric and how come the balancing timelines, or like, if there's any universe that's been going back on itself again and again and again, and that's X-Men. As I said, there's a running joke in Deadpool. How come there's all these little timelines? I don't think DC's too far gone where they can't just introduce us, even if it mixes up with their timelines a little bit. And I think Matt Reeves is gonna do that. I think Matt Reeves' Batman is gonna be I love the fact that Matt Reeves is doing Batman. I think the fact that they're able to say it's not like a Batman and a Gotham like any world. I think DC has that on their mind, that they can change stuff. I think they can't go into the idea of we're going pumping up movies and they're not connected to any universe, because they've already introduced us to the universe and they're bringing back old characters from it. So they can't do that, but they can reintroduce us to the universe in a new way.
So then off that point, so final question, I think that we have established that in order for DC to be able to at least catch up or pave their own way to get on the MCU level, it does come down to them being able to build a universe that makes sense, at least, good direction, and good choice of movies, which I think we've discussed. So let's say if DC do make those decisions, let's say that 5 years down the line, the universe is shaping back up again. The question I have for you now is that if they get their stuff in order and they are able to build a universe again that makes sense, with movies that are killing it, some interconnectivity, even if it's not a lot, but at least some that makes sense to at least make us believe that these characters are at least in the same universe, or which ones are in the same universe. If they then follow that formula, can they ever reach the success of Marvel? And let's just deem what success means. I think that commercially, pop culture wise, Marvel are kings. Like, we know that. Box office wise, I mean, look, Avengers Endgame is the highest grossing movie of all time. They've just reached a pinnacle that is just no other studio, especially when it comes to comic book properties or other shared universes, have reached. So the question is now, is that if DC can get all that together, can they ever reach that level of success? Or do you think it's simply too late? Is Marvel too far ahead of the game?
You see, a lot of people will say Marvel is. I don't particularly think that. I think Marvel's not the first to create a universe or to create certain movies like that. I think they've just, obviously we said the great leadership and stuff like that. I think with DC, it's refreshing to see something new. For one. And I think DC has amazing stories under its archives. Like, they have, like, DC, you need to remember, DC, when it comes to comics, has legendary status, like storylines that haven't been touched at all. And like the comic book fans will appreciate that, but you need to understand DC, like if we looked at the 2000s, we looked at it back in the day, DC generally has more popular heroes than Marvel. Back in the day, I'm not talking about now. Before Marvel was a thing, we knew Spider-Man. Like that's legit where it was.
Yeah.
Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Wolverine wasn't even a part of Marvel at that thing. But if you ask people about DC, everyone knows Superman.
Yeah.
Everyone knows Batman. Everyone knows Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Like we know a lot of these characters, and I think that's the good thing that it has on his hand. But I think they need to be very, very, very particular, and we need to also take into factor maybe combat fatigue might come in.
Yeah.
I don't think it will.
But you never know,
because I think there's always going to be like an audience for these type of movies. It might die down a little bit in terms of audience, but I think there's always going to be a love and audience for this. But in terms of DC doing it as well, I think they just have to look at the long haul. I think once they make a string of movies that they're secure with, that's had box office success, they're going to bring in more of these audiences back. Yeah. Because as I said, connectivity makes us watch other movies. Yeah. Like watching Avengers Endgame makes you watch Captain Marvel. Yeah. Like there's certain things like watching Endgame makes you watch Spider-Man Far From Home. Immediately you want to know what's going on with that.
Yeah. And as I said before, like with DC, even if they don't want to do the Marvel method in terms of saying, okay, we have our endpoint and we're going to work towards that endpoint, even if they don't want to do it that way, as Bonnie was saying, at least attempt to be able to make even some loose connectivity, because we're not stupid. We if you're presenting that these characters are at least somewhat connected, at least make that clear. Even if you don't want to necessarily make like a long-term goal of you want to make maybe a big bad or a big team-up movie and you want to work towards that, at least make some interconnectivity. But I will agree with you in that I think that if they can do that, then in 5 to 10 years, I'm not going to say that they're going to be on Marvel's level, because I think it is going to be difficult, but they can at least be able to somewhat get some of that reputation, some of that good reputation, some of that gold that they were at least perceived to have or be having a few years ago. And I think that they can ultimately get there. But it's going to be interesting to find out. I'm looking forward to see how it pans out. Todd Phillips' Joker comes out in autumn, so that's going to be the next big thing. But anyway, guys, that's been this video in terms of the MCU versus DCEU and if can DC ever catch up. That is Bonnie Fonseca. My name is Cameron Kelly Smith. Thank you for tuning into this video. If you like what you see here, hit that subscribe button. Also hit the like, comment, hit that bell notification, and stay tuned to the content we produce each and every week. Thank you once again, guys. Have a good day.